Good morning, everyone. My name is Rushika Bhatia from SME 10X, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you back to our Ask the Expert series. So something that we've covered in our previous sessions is that digitization and automation are affecting industries in profound ways. Healthcare, of course, is no exception. From a technological perspective, we see a host of new technologies, whether it's AI, 3D printing, AR, VR, telemedicine, and a lot more now being fully integrated into healthcare delivery. Meanwhile, from a provider's perspective, we're seeing a lot of patients increasingly asking for greater efficiency in the care delivered to them, and that too in more convenient and comfortable settings. So it's safe to say, as a result, that the entire paradigm of healthcare is completely changing. And it's against that backdrop that we bring to you today's session. I have joining me today three very, very valuable experts, because we'll be discussing various aspects of discussion, because it's certainly not a simple path ahead. So please join me in welcoming our first guest for today, Dana Masadi, who's the COO of Neurospinal Hospital. Dana, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Very pleased to be here. So I'm Chief Operating Officer of Neurospinal Hospital, and I'm here today to shed light on our topic, as Rushika rightly said, from a provider point of view, hospital point of view, and as much as possible from a patient perspective, being a patient myself, because the thing is, no matter where you stand in the supply chain or in service, if you're dealing with the hospital, the patient is your ultimate client. And as a healthcare provider, if the technologies that we invest in are not in the end serving the patient, then no matter how exciting they are, it's just a very expensive way to waste your time and effort. So I want to set context for what my colleagues will be speaking about and leave you with one thought at the end, which I'll come back to. If that takeaway message gets understood from my side, it will be great. I want to start first of all by talking about, like Rushika has covered, technology and digitization. It's revolutionized healthcare probably more than a lot of other sectors. So whether you're talking about AI, nanotechnology, telemedicine, it's broken down barriers. For example, I was explaining that in medical tourism, even if you don't want to consider COVID at the moment, but in medical tourism, one of the major issues for patients to travel for care was going into the unknown and not knowing how they're going to follow up when they come back. So with telemedicine, this barrier is almost non-existent right now. They come informed, they come prepared. On a technological side, for example, I work in a spine hospital, and we get people with back pain. I mean, most people would have back pain at one point in their life. And you know that if you go for a test, you go for an MRI, you lie down on a table, you get the images. A lot of times you don't find what is wrong with the patient. But now with the upright MRI, which we started using recently, you can see the spine for the first time in history in a bending position, in a sitting position. So it's improved diagnostics. And patient care thereby. So it's also, you know, the general other advantages is it enables quick, informed decisions. It helps patients being more involved in their care, which is where we're heading. But, and I really want to make, you know, put an underline under this, however, a lot of healthcare providers right now, or I think people across all fields, they're just jumping at technologies as soon as they come out without going in check of, does it serve our strategy? Does it really help the patient? Is it adding any value to what it is that we do? For us, it is delivering great patient care, advancing prevention, because this is where we should be all going, starting to prevent. And technology can be helpful, but you have to be very mindful of it. So don't get me wrong, I'm all for technology and all for digitization. It's extremely important. But my question to you is, no matter where you stand, is have your priorities in check. Make sure that it serves the patient and the community, be it by increasing safety, reducing or increasing its safety or involvement. If it's aligned properly with your strategy, if it serves the healthcare team in a way that will help them prevent errors, for example. My thought of technology, of any good EMR, for example, is it should not allow you to make mistakes even if you wanted to. That, to me, is a successful implementation. And two points very important, which my colleagues are going to be talking about later, is it underlined by solid processes? Because if you have poor processes and you just digitalize them, you're just going to speed up the trash that you get as an output. And do you have the right infrastructure to implement it? So all in all, does it add value? Does it make sense? The takeaway message that I wanted to leave everybody with at this stage is, as healthcare providers, our role is to deliver great patient care. Now they're talking more about care, but also about experience and helping in starting to move from treating to preventing. So to create, like Sheikh Mohammed, His Highness has said, a happy and healthy community. But while you're trying to do that as a provider, I think it's important that we always remember that technology and digital solutions, they are not the doer, they are the enabler. As long as we remember this, it's hard to go wrong in your selection, implementation processes. That is it for me. I'm going to leave it over to Sid to speak more about the other aspect of digitalization in healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, for a great overview on the provider perspective for implementing digital solutions. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sid Shah, and as Program Manager with Frost & Sullivan's Transformational Health Program, I track the future direction of the global healthcare industry. I think when we talk about digital health as patients, we often think about smartphone apps, wearables, and the like for use at home or elsewhere to monitor our health. That is certainly the biggest trend, but it's important to acknowledge that these technologies, along with several other digital solutions, are also used in hospitals. So apart from the mainstay healthcare IT software, such as EMR, patient records, revenue cycle management software, there are various other digital solutions that are now being adopted in hospitals as well. They serve three primary purposes, and let's take them one by one. So the first and foremost, I think should be, is for helping doctors, nurses, the clinical staff by automating parts of the redundant tasks that they perform every day so that they can spend more time on the most important, the most critical aspect of their job, which is to care for patients. So something as simple as a doctor using dictation software infused with natural language processing for making notes about a patient, or as Dana just said, integrating it with error correction so that you cannot make a mistake, instead of manually typing information in the system can be a great relief. Just as FYI, entering information in patient medical records is one of the major reasons for doctors' burnout, at least in the Western countries. On a broader level, let's take the example of a hospital emergency room. It's generally crowded. You need to wait for your turn. There is little transparency on when you actually get called to be seen. An example of digitization that probably has already taken place and is seen increasing adoption globally is that of a self check-in kiosk, just very similar to what you have at the airports. That brings in some level of transparency, and then the staff there is more focused on attending to patients rather than answering questions on when a patient will be seen or when is it my turn. So that's a very simple example, but internal to the digital, to the emergency room, is another solution which sort of digitizes the whiteboard. A digital whiteboard is something that is in the emergency room. It's on the patient's information. It keeps current information about the status of the patients, the doctors who are in charge, what is the step in the process where they are right now, etc. And this is updated in real time, automatically, not manually. with information coming in from other departments and sources. So, for example, doctors who are waiting on a patient's lab results can be notified as soon as they are ready, and so that they can begin the further treatment quickly. So you're processing more patients faster and quicker. So you can imagine the impact that this can have as against a manually updated whiteboard amidst all the chaos, not showing accurate information, versus this digital, automatically updated whiteboard that helps streamline the process. So this is just one department in a hospital, and every department has several such solutions, including some that are being developed at the overall hospital level called command centers, which are very similar to an airport's, air traffic control tower, for example. Another live example that I'll quickly run through is, probably the use of analytics. This is a live example from a Florida-based hospital in the United States, where they used analytics on their patients' medical records, in the past patients' medical records, to identify what are the best practices followed by their doctors while treating patients. They started with pneumonia as one of the first disease conditions, and then identified the best clinical protocols for every step to treat such patients, and made sure then that they implemented these, and all doctors at the hospital followed the same protocol. That resulted in approximately $1,400 of administrative savings per patient, and patients also got discharged 2 days earlier on an average. Overall, they estimated the over about 10 times return on investment, because they invested something in the range of 75,000 US dollars, and estimated the savings to be 800,000 US dollars for the very first year alone. So as you can see, there are multiple digital solutions that can really help hospitals improve patients' health while saving costs. So that's the first one, on automating the tasks for nurses and doctors. The second purpose out of the three is for enhancing patient experience. Hospitals inherently are scary environments, unfortunately, when you are the patient. So if we can do something to address that fear, it can help patients heal and recover faster. The link between mental and physical health is well established. Some non-technology examples include the use of art, paintings in the hospitals, gardens, walkways, etc., that actually encourage the patients to get up and walk about after their surgeries, after their procedures, helping them heal faster, recover faster. But of course, we are here to talk about digital technology examples, and probably one of the easiest to understand is infotainment systems that go in hospital rooms. These are smart. They can provide information on the patient's specific disease condition that they are suffering from. They can also give you information about the ideal diet to follow, ideal post-discharge for instructions to follow at home, your medication, etc. And of course, usual, they would offer your usual entertainment as well. The other thing that could be done is the lights, the bed position, all of them can be controlled by voice or with a touchscreen tablet. And this eliminates essentially the need for calling in a nurse to perform these basic functions, who the nurse can therefore then focus on what is their main focus, which is patient care. The third purpose is more for the hospital itself than the patients or providers. Hospitals are, as you are well aware, large buildings or complexes, and running them is no easy task. Hospital operations can definitely benefit from several digital solutions. One of the most prominent ones that we see is patient flow. So ensuring that there are no bottlenecks in the system, so that patients go from one place to the other, from one department to the other, and back and through the hospital and through discharge, without any hiccups, without any high wait times at a particular stage or an area. Because hospitals are highly dynamic environments with emergency cases taking priority over others daily, this running those operations is quite a task. So real-time patient and staff location awareness, situational awareness, all of these are very, very important, and they can be achieved using wearable RFID tags or other kinds of technologies that can help in managing the flow. There are also other solutions such as energy management, building facilities management, equipment maintenance needs. All of those can also ultimately, if we implement digital solutions, help improve the hospital's bottom lines. So those are the three purposes. Now, if you think about it, majority of these have underlying one single. Critical first step for anyone developing a hospital efficiency solution is to first understand the current state in the hospitals, especially on staff routine as they perform their tasks. That is the workflow. A solution developed to address their challenges must fit into their routine without significant deviation. If not, then adoption is going to be impacted severely. And that is, I think, something that Dana also was alluding to. And she's offered her provider perspective. on how they look at it, and I agree with her views completely. All of these three purposes that we've spoken about right now, they are actually the three pillars of what at Frost and Sullivan we call smart hospitals. The concept involves not just having a digital hospital, but solutions that integrate well with each other, with your existing solutions as well, and into the staff's routines or workflow, thus helping the hospital achieve a great positive impact. The Middle East is, I think, one hotspot for this trend of smart hospitals because of the significant investments coming in to develop new hospitals and health cities, and now even a virtual hospital. So it's a great time to be in the digital health space now more so than ever. Thank you for listening to what my take is on the hospital's digital health space. And with that, I'll pass over to Marwan for his views.
Thank you, Sid, and thank you, Dana. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Marwan Zaidan. I'm leading the real estate and healthcare segments for Schneider Electric across Middle East and Africa. So, we've heard from Dana on how important it is to not just deploy technology for the sake of technology. And I think this is very important for all industries, let alone healthcare, because healthcare is all about the patient. So, it's very important to have the human being in our focus. And we've heard from Sid on how important to be able to do more with less. And again, this is very crucial now with the limited resources we have everywhere, and everyone is focused on being more optimized. Now, at Schneider Electric, our focus is not on the medical side, and we've been focusing on healthcare for quite a long time, and we have a global focus on it. We mainly look into things like the electrical distribution, the critical power, and the building environment. And you might think these are older systems, archaic systems. So what do they have to do with the future of digital healthcare? Well, in fact, we've been pushing digital and digital transformation in them because we've realized it helps us be safer, much more efficient, and have a better experience both for the patient and for the operational side of the hospital environment. And if you look at the pandemic situation, a lot of the institutions um, realized how important it is to be much more digital because they need to be agile. They need to be able to do things much more remotely. They need to be able to fine tune certain things and see how did it help or change it again. For us, hospitals are what we call critical buildings. And because they're critical buildings, we cannot afford to have any disruptions. We have to operate at an optimal way almost all the time. On the electrical side, what we do is we embed sensors, both in our equipment and in the overall systems. And the idea is we want to take in data, as much data as we can about what things are happening and certain spikes or changes. Think about electrical currents, think about temperatures, vibrations, power quality. When we have these changes, we know that something is wrong. But the more data we have, and sometimes it's a massive amount of data, and this is where we rely on technology, with that input of data and by leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence, we can start to correlate. And with that correlation, we can get to a fair amount of accuracy in terms of what is going wrong, where is the problem, and more importantly, how do I fix it? And can I fix a specific part in it instead of having to change the whole? So it makes the facilities team much more efficient, helps us tackle a problem long before it happens, and overall the experience is better and we can do much more with our resources. And then let's say something completely out of our hand happened. For example, an earthquake, God forbid, and an outage did take place. So here we rely on backup power, we rely on UPS systems or renewable energy to make sure that we can continue, especially in critical areas like an operating theater. Then moving to the building environment side, so similar to the electrical side, but here we're looking at temperature, humidity, noise even, lighting. And we've shown that even in places like an office environment, the better environment you have, the more productive you are. So in a hospital place, it's even more crucial because it helps us heal faster and better. So here we look into automating the temperature cycles, the humidity, leveraging natural light, having blind control. And we do all of that while looking at the patient, and we give the patient a certain ability to do some fine-tuning adjustments. But we also leverage that to be able to automate the spaces. So a room that is not being used will go on standby. When a patient goes out, let's say for his operation, again, goes in standby. If I need to maintain the room, I will maintain the room. But then it's not just about the comfort. We remember a hospital environment is an environment with 6 people, and there is a high risk of contaminations and contagions. So we leverage these systems to be able to have better airflow, to maintain negative pressure in isolation rooms, to check the status of the filters, make sure things are optimum, and we reduce the risk of spreading diseases. So all of that shows how we can go back into these core systems, leverage technology, and helps us to be as optimum as possible, enhance the experience, but also make it much better and much easier for facilities management to take care of the overall place. Now, definitely I can talk more and more about these areas, but I think it's time that we stop and we listen to our audience members. So with that, I would like to go back to Rushika, who will help us manage the question and answer section of this episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you guys for those fantastic insights. I think you've given us all some food for thought. So while you guys were presenting, we were monitoring the questions coming in, from the audience. But before we get into that, I'd like to step back for a second and kind of get the discussion going, with your permission, guys. So that I'd like to start with you. So from the very onset of today's session, we've talked a lot about the evolution of healthcare and how far we've come. So I'd like to find out from you, when we talk about the evolution of healthcare and at the pace at which the sector is moving, would you perhaps be able to pinpoint 3 things or 3 technologies that would have seemed far-fetched, probably 5 years from today, but we're actually seeing them go live today? What are your thoughts on that?
That's just a fantastic question, and I think like I said, today the pace of technology evolution has increased so much. It's probably the best time to be in this space. So if we think about just 5 years ago, some of these technologies we already know, but I'm going to throw a light on some of the use cases that were developed. The first one is telehealth, and we cannot ignore that, especially today with COVID-19. We knew about telehealth; it existed for over a decade. But the adoption has just taken off significantly because of COVID-19. Some of those changes that we are seeing in terms of adoption are likely to stay on even after the COVID-19 pandemic subsides. So that is something that possibly was not thought of at all. We never thought about having that impact. So now hospitals are beginning to rethink whether they should be changing their infrastructure, especially the new ones, to make way for this telehealth sort of a service line as well. It has administrative impact as well. The second I would say is artificial intelligence. The kinds of use cases that have come about are fantastic. Just to give you a couple of examples, with COVID-19 itself, the outbreak of COVID-19 was actually predicted even before it was announced by the WHO or the US CDC, almost a week before, by an AI algorithm. The other example is drug discovery. Eli Lilly is now testing one of its existing arthritis treatment medication because AI analysis pointed out that it could be used for with COVID-19 patients, and now it's currently in clinical trials. And there's another example for that as well. Radiology. There are so many AI solutions that are available today that are helping radiologists actually process this large volume of COVID-19 patients by pointing out suspicious cases. So helping sort of filter out. And like Dana mentioned, we have these upright MRIs possible as well. So it's a confluence of the technology development from a healthcare standpoint, as well as these digital technology capabilities that are going on as well. And one last one I would mention is Tricorders. The Tricorder names comes from the Star Trek Enterprise, of course, but the concept is of being able to diagnose conditions at the point of care, maybe 10 or 12 different conditions. A couple of years back, there was a huge hackathon kind of a competition, and out of those, 40 different teams actually started developing these kinds of devices to be able to diagnose maybe up to 5 or 6 conditions with just breath as one of the input parameters. So those are actually coming into the picture. Some of these are available as of today in the regulatory pathway process, but these are the kinds that probably 5 years ago would have just seemed something from the dreams of fantasy.
That's very interesting, Sid, that you mentioned telemedicine, and I think we need to take a second to acknowledge that, because there's a lot happening within the telemedicine space at the moment. We're seeing a lot of startups, the likes of ADOC, and a lot of others come to the forefront, and we're seeing a lot of funding being put into this field. Marwan, just want to get your thoughts as well, and kind of get you into this conversation. When we look at things such as telemedicine, AI, the other things that Sid mentioned, where do you see the UAE positioned, on a macro level, from a global perspective in terms of evolution within healthcare transformation? How do you see how far has the UAE come, and what can we expect in 2020 from your perspective?
To be honest, it quite varies, and we have seen some really good examples in the UAE, and the ones that come to mind that we've worked with closely are the likes of Dr. Sulaiman Al Habib and the Cleveland Clinic, and there are others definitely in the region. I think adoption is there. There are pioneers in the domain. And I think there's more to be done with many other institutions as well. I'm sure many are being cautious, rightly so, I would say, because again, nobody should adopt technology just for the sake of technology. And even if one technology is being adopted by one hospital in the same region, doesn't mean that another has to adopt it as well. We're working with many. We see the interest is there. Artificial intelligence is being applied in many areas, like Sid said, so from medical records to building systems, and I think it could be a game changer as well. One thing I would say, even cloud services is one of the key enablers, but we've seen a lot of reluctance around cloud services for privacy reasons. But I think in due time, this will be quite a good enabler. So I think it's a journey. We're getting there. We have our pioneers, and eventually a lot is moving, and we're all moving towards digitization.
Absolutely. Well said, Marwan. So I'm going to jump into a quick audience question that's come in here today via YouTube. And Dana, I think you probably are well placed to answer this. How much should government regulations and overall procedures adapt to this whole reality of patient care and smart hospitals? From you're very much in the center and on the front lines of this conversation from a provider's perspective. So how are you seeing procedural change happening, and are you seeing a lot of change in terms of regulations?
Yes. So we definitely are, but may I comment first on the telemedicine issue? Because being in healthcare, we've seen how patients responded to it. And it's a great way for people, like you said, in remote areas who don't have access to hospitals. But we also saw that patients, for them, they felt that it was a very cold interaction. So again, my caution is don't allow technology to remove the human factor from healthcare. This is very important for me. And it's not just about being it cold, it's got huge limitations, telemedicine. I mean, who does the clinical exam? Who does the physical exam? So I think it complements what actually we're doing, and it complements it in a great way, but it is not there yet. It is not the answer to all our problems, although it's a great initiative. If you talk about regulation, just take telemedicine, for example. As COVID started and most hospitals in Dubai, including ourselves, turned into a COVID hospital, we couldn't see a lot of patients anymore. But DHA, Dubai Health Authority, issued very, very quickly a circular to allow and make possible the telemedicine, because it has a lot involved. It's not just about the doctor-patient consultation. You have the lab tests that come in place if needed. You have the prescriptions. So healthcare is actually a very, very interchanged systems of multidisciplines. And regulation around it, I would say, although it's coming, it's still in its very early stages, and there are definitely more improvements that can be made. At the moment, not just for patient treatment, in fact, but also for education. For example, the same way we're sitting right here, each one of us in one country, and I don't know where the audience is from, but I miss them. That's the first time I don't see my audience. It's allowing us to deliver education with our doctors in Africa. So regulation is starting to pick up. It's definitely been adapted to allow what are the patient rights, what are the patient responsibilities, the physician rights, the physician responsibilities. But at the same time, in my opinion, it's still got a long way to go before it's fully mature.
Right. Marwan, I'd like to also throw the same question at you, because I know that you have experience of working with clients as you manage the healthcare segment. How do you see, in your interactions, how do you see the regulations changing over time, over the last couple of years, as we move more and more towards a smart hospital, as it were?
So definitely it helps a lot to push more. I would also say there is a big role that we play as solution providers in terms of pushing that edge as well, to show what is coming, what is the benefit of it, how has it been applied in other areas of the world, how can we take the lessons learned and apply it locally. So we work with authorities as well to help them change and adapt and adopt later on. There are still many areas where it's still gray and it's still unknown. So in these areas, some pioneers go ahead and they deploy. Definitely, there's and I'm seeing some of the questions coming in, there's definitely a very big importance in terms of protection of data. And that is something that we cannot play with, we will never play with, especially when it comes to personal private data or medical data. What we as Schneider focus more on is building data, electrical data, so typically that's not that sensitive. So those are some of the areas that we focus on.
Superb. So I think while we're speaking about more of a, from a macro perspective, before we get into some of the more detailed questions that are coming in, Sid, I'd like to throw this one at you, if you don't mind. There's a question coming in which talks about, how are all the trends that we're talking about today impacting the wider supporting sectors around healthcare? So, for instance, pharmaceutical or the services sector, which surround the healthcare industry and are at the core of everything that's happening. What are your thoughts on that, from a data point of view or from a numbers point of view?
That's a great question, and I've been saying this for a while now. I think in healthcare, data is now the new currency, and that I'm saying that because we've always had data, but it was earlier in a paper form, not really analyzable, or you could not really put two and two together. Now that we are going digital, with data being available, it's impacting multiple different areas. So if I were to take the example of pharmaceuticals or even medical devices, we deal with a trend called real world evidence or real world data. So once a pharmaceutical drug has been approved or a medical device has been approved, it's in the field, there is little that we do to track how is it performing, unless there's an adverse event with that, in which case the regulatory authorities pull it back. But now with this kind of digital data, we come to know that specific cohorts of patients, specific groups of patients are more better treated with a particular kind of drug versus another group of patients may require a different kind of drug, which falls under the same class of drugs. But that kind of insight is coming in because of the digital data that's available. A lot of activities happening around that space. Services as well, because everything is going digital, we have a lot more opportunity to really talk about, now we can really talk about the concepts of personalized medicine or precision medicine, because we have the data to really drive that, and that will automatically impact all of these surrounding service sectors as well, right from something as telehealth to the traditional players such as devices and pharmaceutical players.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sid. Yeah, you're quite right, because this is also reflected in the kind of audience that we have joining us today, because we're seeing a lot of people tuning in from different sectors, not just the healthcare sector, which is quite interesting. I have another question coming in, and Dana, perhaps this one is for you. The question is, which hospitals are open to AI technology, and are there any hospitals currently in the UAE that are already allowing things such as machine learning? Now, I know we can't answer this question for all hospitals, but perhaps from your perspective, Dana, how far have you come along within your hospital with AI technology?
I think it is, not are you AI or are you not AI? I think it's to what level do you put technology and digital solution at the service of your provider and the patients to deliver care. In our hospital, for example, I would say that we are doing as much as is safe to do. You have to understand that implementing a new technology or a new digital solution is a change project. And change requires culture, change requires training, it requires organizations that are ready to adopt this change. Otherwise, it will be overwhelming and it will not yield the results that you need to have. So in our hospital, we're pretty comfortable. I mean, in terms of our operating theater, I think is the most equipped in the UAE. We were the first to bring on the portable CT scan, the first to do brain mapping during awake brain surgeries. At the moment, we're the first to bring the first cyberknife center in the country, which will allow you to remove tumors without actually opening the patient. So that is the hard technology, combined with the soft technology solutions, which is our information system, our data centers, all underlined with the right processes to support them and to drive them. I would say that we're pretty advanced. I speak from a personal perspective. In terms of other hospitals, the UAE, Dubai is a brand, and it's a brand for innovation and so there is pressure on everyone to not lag behind. You have to be always at the forefront of what we do. We just happen to be subspecialized, so our technologies are a bit more specialized into what we do. But I don't believe that there is any hospital who is not adopting telemedicine, for example, and electronic medical record, because also if we go back to regulation, you have Dubai Health Authority who has requested that hospitals should meet a minimum HIM score. So you're not allowed to be just on file. So it's market pressure, it's innovation pressure, it's also regulation to make sure that you deliver good standard, up to the mark, safe healthcare. So I would say pretty advanced, all in short. The UAE is pretty advanced in that field overall.
Great. So, Marwan, moving on to you, I have another question coming in, and I know we addressed this slightly earlier on, which asks, how are traditional healthcare systems being affected by new telehealth providers such as startups that are coming in like HeyDoc? And on the back of that, I'd also like to add in here, how as Schneider, as a global provider in healthcare solutions, are you looking at potentially partnering with these startups that are coming, to the frontier, and partnering with them to kind of adopt with, these new smarter healthcare solutions that are coming in the, within the SME space?
Okay, so sure, I will generalize the answer a little bit. Now, first of all, definitely, I would say partnerships are very, very, very important in the areas of digital or the areas of technology, because at the end it is like a big puzzle, and you will never, no one vendor has everything. You will always look for others that can come and complement the different pieces of the puzzle. So this is from one side. Disruptions are always there, so definitely some things will be disrupted, but not everything will be disrupted. So the coming in of telemedicine or telehealth, as Dana rightly said initially, it will affect some areas, but not everyone will go and jump on telehealth. I still personally will want to go and see somebody if I can. Now, if I can, then I will likely use something like that. And then I will answer a little bit, because there was a question around what is a smart hospital and do we have smart hospitals? I think it's not about what you deploy from technology or from digital, because you might have these very expensive robots running around and receiving patients coming in, but then it might be very cumbersome. You don't know how to interface with them, and this will be a very negative experience. I think it is not really quantitative, it's more qualitative. A smart hospital is one that is able to receive me in a very nice, natural way, even if it's just to guide me on who to go talk to. It is one that is operating in a very optimal way from using the resources, so relying on renewable energy in some areas, not wasting energy, and it's one that's helping me maintain better, and so on and so on. So I think it is a little bit of all of these different areas coming together rather than one aspect that we're just deploying.
Absolutely. I'd also like to get Dana your thoughts on the same question, and Sid as well. Dana, perhaps you can go first. From a hospital point of view, what is on the agenda in terms of partnerships? How are you looking at some of the new innovations coming about within the startup space, and perhaps trying to integrate them?
So if you're looking at solutions like HeyDoc or just online consulting, again, I will reiterate, those are important, but they are more suited for primary healthcare and especially for chronic conditions. Somebody who's got a long-standing chronic condition, who needs constant follow-up on their medications, on their diabetes, on their hypertension, I think with that, telehealth is extremely important. I think it's important in that it helps break geographical boundaries. So anywhere you can consult a doctor, that's sitting anywhere, but it has its limitations, like I mentioned earlier. You cannot perform a physical exam on a patient who's sitting away from you. So the partnerships will happen. And by the way, what I must mention is that in the UAE in general, the primary healthcare sector is still developing. It's not yet where it should be. People go directly to the specialist or the consultant. There is no real gatekeeper to direct those patients. So at the moment, we have enough capacity, so we're doing good. But as it grows and as it advances, I think the more primary healthcare sector develops, the more telemedicine is going to be utilized, even locally.
Sid, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree with Dana, and that's exactly the point I wanted to make. That it's more about with telehealth or teleconsultations, it's providing access to care for people who currently don't have it. Maybe they're in rural areas, or it's far away from a hospital. And like Dana mentioned, right, if you don't have a strong primary healthcare system, you will have your hospitals being overloaded, overburdened with patients who could technically be addressed with primary care alone, which could, to a certain extent, of course, acknowledging the limitations that Dana mentioned, be taken care of with telehealth and with chronic condition management, etc.
So, Dina, I'd like to come back to you for a second, because I know in our discussions earlier as well, and in your presentation today, you emphasized a lot on striking the right balance between the human element of healthcare as well as the tech element of healthcare. So, I'd like you to address that, and also on the back of that, I have a question which is very interesting coming from YouTube, which asks, why do you think the healthcare industry is not focusing enough on staff burnout, and I assume this question is in light of the current situation and the pressure on the healthcare system. So can you talk a little bit about finding that right balance between human and tech, and also on some of the measures that should be in place to enable the human and the resources to kind of work efficiently?
Right. So I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, right? I don't know if you know his video, Start With Why. And that would be my answer, or my starting point with this question. Start with why. Why do healthcare organizations exist? They exist to serve patients, they exist to care, and now they're starting to exist to prevent also the occurrence of disease, not just to treat it. So that cannot be done by a machine purely, because we are human beings. Part of treatment, like Sid touched on earlier, is the psychological aspect of your disease. How can a machine show you empathy? There are no feelings behind it. So in my opinion, again, I will go back to it. Technology is not a doer, it's an enabler. It should enable you to deliver your care more efficiently, in a safer manner, but you should definitely make sure that the patient emotions are always in check, that they have that they can feel the empathy for what they go through, because diseases are a very stressful experience. I mean, I lost my uncle to cancer here in the UAE at a very young age, just a few months ago. And when for example, that you're in a terminally ill stage, it all becomes about the empathy that is shown and the human care and making the patients comfortable. In my opinion, this is something that technology can facilitate but cannot deliver on its own. So I'm going to go back to that again. We shouldn't be heading, like we see in movies, into an empty room where you're just talking to a computer, self-diagnosis, self-treatment, etc. I think this is definitely not where healthcare should be going. And I'm sorry, the other part of your question was.
So the other part of the question was, how can healthcare providers ensure that they're avoiding burnout when it comes to healthcare staff or healthcare resources?
Right. So all along I've been focusing on the patient, but when you focus on the patient, you also focus on who works around the patient. Healthcare providers are extremely important in the setting. We are in the service sector. We don't give products. We deliver service to a patient, which is delivered by people who are at the front end. They can be stressed. They work long shifts. They have to go through emotional counseling of terminally ill patients. In COVID, they were frontliners, and they can be affected, definitely. So burnout happens when you don't have that priority in check. When I mentioned my checklist earlier, part of it was, does it serve the patient? Is it aligned with your strategy? Does it make the healthcare worker's job easier? Ideally, we should also focus not just on making the healthcare worker's job easier, but also use those technologies, those digital solutions, to continue also to monitor the mental and physical status of our healthcare workers. How you reward, how you arrange shifts, the constant feedback that you try to get from your healthcare workers, I think, and how you allocate resources. So in Dubai, I must say that there is a little shortage in some areas, but overall, in terms of bed to population, nurse to population, I think we're pretty well covered. And I think burnout is happening more where there isn't a decent enough ratio of healthcare provider or facilities to patient numbers. But in Dubai, that's very well planned.
Superb. Thank you for that, Dana. That was very comprehensive. I think that answered the question. So I think we're approaching the end of the allocated hour for our session. But before we wrap up and get into the final thoughts of the session, I'd like to take one last question, and perhaps we can go through each one of you with this question. Sid, I'll start with you. If you had a wish list of technologies that you'd like to see integrated into the healthcare sector over the next 5 years, what would be the top 3 things on your mind?
I would say artificial intelligence and analytics, but of course, the deployment would be the way that Dana is talking about. It's as a supporting tool for the healthcare provider, not exactly as taking over completely. That we do not see will happen, primarily for the reasons that Dana has already mentioned. But artificial intelligence and analytics across all the varied use cases in the hospital as well as outside. So we are thinking, as Dana mentioned, we are moving away from not only treating sick people but preventing people from getting sick in the first place. How do you keep them healthy longer? So for preventing chronic conditions from happening, but if they do happen, preventing them from worsening, and then within the hospital to help them really manage the load that they have. So those kinds of use cases for AI and analytics tools, multiple ones of those is what I would think is the best way to go.
Marwan, over to you.
So for me, I think the ideal that many entities, whether small startups or large ones, are trying to get into is this platform, the magical platform that really brings the best of breed, like the best technologies from everything, and is able to tie solutions that tap into the electrical side, building side, all the way up to patient experience, medical records, maybe my allergies. So bringing all of that together so that you have really a very nice environment that can receive you and help you all the way throughout. And I think we're still missing that. We're getting to it, but we're still missing it.
And finally, Dana, what about you?
So as you asked the question, I thought of two things from our patient environment. I work in a neurospinal hospital, so obviously we get people with strokes, with brain damage, and it's really painful to see people who are trapped in their body with no communication whatsoever with the outside world. I think if I had a wish list, number one would be a tool that helps those people who are trapped inside their body to be able to communicate with their surrounding. There has been a little bit of advances in that stage where when they take an MRI of the brain and talk to the patient, they could see different activity in the brain, meaning that they feel and they sense, but they're not able to talk back. One thing we've done at our hospital, the way Sid mentioned the patient bedside entertainment systems, is we have something for patients who can still move their eyes, and they can just by fixating the screen communicate with our doctors and nurses. But I would really like to see that taken one step further and be able to get those patients to communicate with the outside world, because I can't just imagine what they must be going through. And if you allow me, I have a number two. Cancer is now the disease that people, it's just very, very scary, intimidating. We still don't have a real cure. I heard that animals, certain animals can actually sense in their owners, the same way they said dogs can tell you if you have COVID because something changes in your body composition, that it's the same for cancer. Most cancer cases are lethal, deadly, because they're not detected early enough. I would love to be wearing a watch that detects my first cancer cell coming up, get it dealt with, and just be back on, to carry on my normal life. I think those would be two amazing technologies that would really change a lot.
Well, thank you, Dana. I definitely agree with you. I think those are some very interesting technologies, and hopefully we can have a discussion 3 years from now and talk about how these technologies are being integrated into hospitals. I know I promised this was the last question, but I'd like to squeeze in one last audience question coming in, because I'm trying to address and take up every question that's coming in. I have Bhushan who's asking, how long would it take for AI to become an integral part of healthcare systems? Siddharth, probably you want to take this one?
Yeah, and I think it's going back to what Marwan also alluded earlier, and it's even to the question that Dana answered about which UAE hospitals have AI or don't have AI. It's not so much about do you have it or don't have it. Even the concept of smart hospitals or using these AI technologies or digital solutions, I think of it as it being a journey. It's not a destination that you take an AI solution, you implement it, and now you're smart. That's not where it ends. And it really depends on how you would want to consider what is the use case for AI in healthcare. If you take radiology, we consider that to be the bellwether area of application for AI. So many solutions exist, so many of them have been implemented, so many of them with the larger companies which make the MRI and CT machines and the software that goes with it. They already incorporate some level of algorithms. Old generation AI is what I would like to call it. It's not necessarily the new generation AI, but it's being used almost the world over already. And if you take some of the newer solutions, the pace at which adoption is happening is really fast. Some other solutions for clinical decision support or others are still on their pace. Of course, there are variations in terms of, first of all, do you have the digital infrastructure within that region, on a global scale, to support the adoption of these technologies? So that is going to be the limiting factor. But is there a ceiling to it to really become integral to a particular system? I don't really think there is one destination that you can define. If you've achieved this, then you are smart or you have AI.
Thanks, Sid. And I think that kind of rounds up where we started from, that it's not a simple path ahead. There's no easy answer to this. So thank you all of you for your insights. It's been great chatting with you all. Before we sign off, any final thoughts? Marwan, I'd like to start with you.
No, look, I think it's a very interesting space to be in. And as much as we were trying to push more digital solutions, I think with the recent events, it's going to accelerate it a little bit. But as Dana rightly said, as Sid rightly said, I think we have to be focused. And an advice to everyone out there, don't just try to copy and paste and just follow. Just pick something that makes sense and do it well and move with it and then evolve.
Great. Dana, any final thoughts for our audience?
I think they've heard a lot from me already. It's just, I would have to agree with what Marwan has said, with what Sid has said also. It's not a destination, it's a journey. Technology continues to evolve. Unfortunately, so do diseases. They continue to surprise us. So I think it's about not losing that continuum and making sure that still, no matter what we do, the patient and the well-being of the patient is at the forefront of every decision that we make. But I think it's extremely important that we start using technology as a way to work in preventive healthcare rather than just fix the damage after it's done. I think this is where the whole healthcare sector should be going. Taking in consideration that probably more than half of the healthcare problems we have are preventable, lifestyle related.
And Sid, any final words?
I think I would just probably summarize all that we've discussed today. And I think one of the key takeaways I would have is what Dana mentioned. The technology is going to be a tool at the end of the day. It's not something that's going to replace the human touch, as she very rightly puts. And then the second thing is, as a vendor, if somebody wants to develop a new solution, there's already a ton of good solutions already out there. It's the point is, how do you really partner with those solutions and make something as a holistic solution, something that is even more valuable, rather than going at it alone or trying to develop something which somebody else has really perfected already. So finding that balance and partnering, developing a holistic solution with the human element at the center of your design, with the patient at the center of the design, is probably the right way to do it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to our audience for joining us, for asking all those great questions. I hope we've answered your questions. And if we haven't, or we've missed your question for any reason, please feel free to still ask it. And our experts are available offline to address them. Thank you, team. Thank you for this lovely chat. And we will see you all in our next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.